Staying strong over here. It's mighty nice. Welcome back, everybody. What up, Fantasy Ecstasy? Copper Drops, Genghis, Happy Honey, Happy Honey. Love it. Alright, little psychedelic electro jams. I'm getting close on the moon. Let's do some tours, yeah? Damn, Theophilus, looking good. This is like with the focal reducer, so it's only gonna get better. What's up, Ellie? Hi again. three times. Let's do it. What's up, Deborah? Trops, what's up? Says, maybe you can help me. My security cam streaming the Koi TV has an RCA hookup for the mic, but every outdoor RCA mic I've found is crap. I really want sound. It's about 120 feet cable from the computer to the pond. That's an ask, honestly. It's tough. I think the best way to really do it is what I found with microphones is you really need a preamp, or you need like an audio interface. So you get like a 1-channel or 2-channel audio interface, and get a good microphone with a super duper long cable, like an extension microphone cable, and then plug that into the audio interface, and then have the audio interface go into something like Pro Tools or Logic or GarageBand. And that's the best way I found. I'm not really sure about RCA hookup. What is that? The red, yellow, and white cables. It's been a while since I've used those. I think maybe a preamp, possibly, or like an amplifier with like an RCA out. That's all I can think of. And then mic that up using an audio interface. Alright, so I'm just grabbing my lunar atlas here. We're gonna go in, you can see the really sharp detail tonight over on Tranquility and Fecunditatis. You can see they're almost like where we're at Theophilus for a second. So goddamn sharp. It's like it's an audio interface is, it just converts the audio to digital live. So you can kind of plug in a microphone or an audio, like a 1/4-inch jack or two jacks and 2 microphones, and then that goes in USB to the computer and it converts the signal. So you want a decent signal. I think you could probably do it with any type of microphone. Perhaps a preamp and a mixer board, yeah, if the stuff is analog. Start off around Theophilus. So the large mare, that's Mare Nectaris, and then you got dead center of the screen, the largest crater, that's Theophilus, underneath that Cyrilius, underneath that Katharina, and then to the top right of it, that little one's called Madler. Terminator cutting right through Mare Nectaris and Fracastorius. And then to the north of Theophilus, you got Sinus Asperitatis, leading into, I want to say, Mare Tranquillitatis. Yo, what's up? Eat all your fish. What's up, C. Smith? Truly crisps. So this is still with the focal reducer. So it's kind of the wide shot with the 2x on the camera, but let's do this wide tour and then I'll switch it up to like maybe a 2x or a 3x. Alright, the little bridge between Serenity and Tranquility. The prominent crater with the central peak, that's Plinius. And the floating one dead center with the darkness, that's Dawes. And then to the left of Plinius, you got Hours, Menelaus, Lacus Hymeus, and Lacus Lenitatis. A lot of shredding in the background. Something a little more chill. Yeah. Eat all your fish, what causes the nipple effect? I think that is probably due to the fact that if these are scarred by lightning bolts that are hitting this one particular spot on the moon, and they go for a while and they create this crater by pushing out electrostatically the surface or boiling the rock. Once the charge or the lightning bolt or the lightning arc discharge is actually, once it finishes and sputters out, it creates like a final energy release, if you've ever seen sputtering discharge videos. So once it blasts the last hit, you get this kind of spheral, or you get a central peak in the middle of the crater. You know, in pop science, I think everyone considers that ballistic remnants from an impact. But you know, I think that when you really consider how electrostatic charge can actually move out and create these very perfect circular craters with craters on rims, you don't see a lot of rubble. You see dendrites, and speaking of which, run over to Copernicus and take a look at our Lichtenberg patterns. Where are we at? Damn, it's looking nice. Look, Plato is north of Mare Imbrium. Yeah. Good. Head over to Copernicus. Let me get wider. What's up, Genghis? Thank you. All right. Yeah, you can really see the patterns coming off of Copernicus. Hexagonal shaped crater. What is it, like 80, 90 kilometers across? And then to the bottom left of it, Kepler. I know for some of my regulars, I've probably gone through this whole sequence every so many times, so let me know if you want me to change it up or just never talk about these common features again. But it's good practice, always remember. So I got Kepler, again, with different types of rays coming out, more pointed, but also dendritic, Lichtenberg. What are the other words for it? It just looks like tendrils and filaments emanating from a central place, and especially Aristarchus, you can see it almost looks like lightning itself, and fractals, and kind of, and really what it is actually just the path of least resistance for the energy. So that's why we get a lot of hexagons, central peaks, dendritic patterns coming off of central craters. You get sinuous rills. Speaking of being right here on top of Aristarchus, you got Schroeder's Valley, Valles Scroteri, snaking its way all the way through Aristarchus Plateau. And that's like a 300-kilometer long kind of filament looking shape that carved a tunnel and doesn't really have a volcano to emanate from, nor does it have the debris of collapsed tunnel rubble. I mean, then I was watching the whole kind of, you know, why are there bright spots or transient lunar phenomenon, you know, like bright, shiny spots on the moon. Here's a perfect example of like an image that even Thunderbolt's project showed in their video. They showed a picture of Aristarchus crater. And it's very fascinating that like everything is so disjointed and disconnected. You know, people in, sorry, I think this music is a tiny bit energetic. A little too energetic for talking over. We got something chiller. A little more chill. Alright. Yeah, so Thunderbolt's project was talking about lunar phenomenon, and they show pictures, I guess random stills of Aristarchus, but really, I mean, wouldn't it warrant scientists or astrophysicists like getting on a stream like this, or like their own stream, for example, and just pointing the scope at Aristarchus and talking about it in more detail. You know, I mouth off about electric universe and science, but I don't really think I know that much, you know, especially the more I learn, the more I realize I know like very, very little about what's going on in terms of like granular detail, because every day I have to kind of remind myself of what really is going on, every moment in a way. I have to keep in check, because we're getting bombarded by so much like crazy information that doesn't make sense, and advertising, and so you really have to do a lot of work to stay critical. But the point is, you know, it would be amazing if Thunderbolt's project had their own telescope and they had their own team that could actually take pictures of real moon stuff and actually put it behind Wall Thornhill, while Wall Thornhill or Stephen Crothers or Pierre-Marie Robitaille actually looked at real footage from citizen astronomers and actually made assessments based on that. It bewilders me why they don't do things like that, and I'm not sure if, like, maybe it's because I don't reach out and send them footage, but I feel like they're putting together these compilation videos. I'm doing the observation. So it's already a lot of work to kind of just make sure the image is excellent and that the stream is always steady. So things like that, I'm just putting out there in the ether. Maybe somehow it'll interconnect through the hidden vibrations, and they'll somehow put out a video with actual lunar footage. Vision says that video was a bit of a mind blown for me, yet it makes sense. I mean, the second half was like stuff they've been talking about for a while with the moon. Like, they always reference essentially Aristarchus and this Schroeder's Valley that we're looking at right here. So like in this, and honestly, since day one, even I want to say like I had seen Electric Universe stuff, but I guess I hadn't seen all the videos yet, like I have now. But I've always been into Aristarchus. Anybody who's followed me from way back knows that this feature that we're looking at right here is just like so many different things going on. You have the whole plateau that looks like a parallelogram, that looks really geometric and kind of stands out like a sore thumb in Oceanus Procellarum in the South Mare Imbrium Basin, which is right there. Really stands out, particular feature. Then you got Aristarchus crater, very bright white crater, anomalous, very large, high walls, interesting geometric like diamond formation with a flat floor at the very corner of this plateau. And then right next to that you have this flat floored like micro mare almost, Herodotus, like the head of the snake. And then somehow you have this 300 kilometer, almost like spermatozoa snaking, sinuous rill all the way through. Like, you can't really see it that well at this particular phase of the moon, but like the late waning crescent, like the 23 waning crescent, you can really see relief on it, and it stands out like crazy. Yo, what's going on? Dub K, what's up, Tom? So yeah, Thunderbolts put out this video today, and so the first half of it just talks about this idea of, and I'm going to use this opportunity to also correct myself. I did it on the last stream once, but I'm going to do it again. I've been saying things that the shiny kind of lunar transient phenomenon is off-gassing, but it's actually called out-gassing, which also makes sense. I want to correct that. And then also that they believe, at the Thunderbolts project or under the Electric Universe paradigm, that outgassing might not be the only reason you have these sparks or flashes on the moon. They might be due to the fact that these parts of the moon are electrically charged. And then they list out a bunch of articles, and one of them is very fascinating because it doesn't dawn on you as to what they're talking about until you really let it sink in. But the fact that even popular science admits to the fact that there's electrostatic levitation of dust, that implies anti-gravity. That implies that there's some sort of record of it's not even a record of levitation, it's just that electrostatic forces can actually levitate matter, is really what they're saying. And this is even in pop sci, so I find that really interesting. It just doesn't really dawn on you what those implications are, but it means that at some levels you have this idea, what we call anti-gravity, which is why I always think that UFOs are really like human-based technology. But I'm gonna keep, I'm getting lost in the ranting and not doing a lot of moon touring. So let's zoom out a bit, just so I can talk about it a bit more. But Aristarchus is fascinating. They should really have some live footage on their videos. All right, take a little smoke break and song it up. Let's see. Alright, this is cam to scope. Got rid of that focal reducer and back down at Theophilus. Looking unbelievable, really. I mean, damn. So, I'm going to settle here for a second. Let it sink in as to what we're looking at. What's supposed to be 250,000 kilometers, 250,000 miles away. And we're just staring deep into a crater that's... Let's see how large Theophilus is real quick. 100 kilometers across. Just really remarkable. So just quick pickup on the outgassing. Right, so I've been saying outgassing because that's popular science and that's what I heard and read about, given that there are these noble gases on the surface, like argon, xenon, neon even, and these are measured using radiometric frequencies and radio telescopes. And so this is what I guess outgassing is, where these gases react to solar radiation and then they give off luminosity. At the same time, you also have what we're seeing right here on the central peak of Theophilus, which is, I think, glinting from sunlight or solar radiation. So it's what we see here on Earth, insofar as like when you're flying and you see mountains kind of glint. I feel like that brightness, that central peak luminosity is from glinting and not outgassing and not electrostatic radiation, but possibly. Man, I'm really enjoying this view of Theophilus. I love the kind of shape of the crescent, the shadow crescent to the left. It almost looks like like a chili pepper or something. It's so silly. Like so much pareidolia exists. Yeah, what's up, Ron Crittenden, Huntsville. Shout outs to Huntsville. What's up, Cleary? Alright, so at this level zoom, I'm going to go to a couple of different craters. So to the top right, we got Madler, M-A-D-L-E-R. For size reference, Madler is supposed to be 28 kilometers across. And really with the clarity tonight, you can kind of see the very interesting regolith. You know, I wonder sometimes, is that ejecta, or is that just vibrational frequencies underneath? You know, as Theophilus was created, were the walls pushed out, almost like essentially creating a bubble at the center, and then the bubble bursts. But it's pushing out all this molten rock, let's say, that it's boiling. And I guess this area that looks like it would be splattered ejecta is actually just kind of raised matter, and it looks like it's strewn or like stretched because it's going along filamentary, like path of least resistance. I wonder, you know, if that's what our eyes are tricking us into thinking, that it's like strewn, but in fact it's just raised. Sillydolia. Peridolia. Alright. See, a lot of features like these little bubbles and wiggles and stuff like that makes me, you know, makes it feel like sputtering. I don't know if any of you if any of you have seen arc welding videos, and you see metal sputtering and kind of like boiling over and then like hardening very quickly. That's what these little pieces look like when they talk about tortured regolith. You wonder if it's ejecta or if it's like sputtered discharge. All right, just heading north. This is Sea of Tranquility, Tranquility Base, and Plinius crater coming up right here with its own little central peak. Plinius being like half the size, I think, roughly. What is that? 43 kilometers across. This other little craterlet, that's Dawes, D-A-W-E-S. Here's another interesting feature, this kind of snaking, almost, you know, typically what I would read about, you know, in pop sci, they would reference this as, I guess, folding of the lunar regolith, like so the land, almost like a landslide folding on top of another piece of land. So I guess the right side kind of folding to the left, but to me it has that kind of snaking pattern in a way. It has a sine wave in it, and it follows a particular geometry. So even though it may seem like land is kind of folding on itself, it still retains, you know, fractal symmetry. And it leads us right to this very cool crater that I like, Posidonius, I think. I'll double check. Yeah, very peculiar and interesting, almost as interesting as Aristarchus, you know, as a whole feature, but this has sinuous rills, tortured regolith, central peak, but like rounded micro peaks, and then like broken walls. What's going on? Astronomy live stream, David. How you doing? Clear says a NASA press release from June 6th says there is water on the moon. Yeah, this is something from data that they had a long time ago, though. I feel like the signatures were there for a long time, but it's just one of those. I feel like it's just a side effect of marketing. I feel if we change. I think the powers that be are so worried about changing astrophysics and moving towards the future because of not being able to make money for some reason, or being able to keep making money from older technologies while milking them and then very, very slowly releasing new technology. So I think there's a lot of that. I think especially because moon science has been so stagnated, considering, you know, if the moon missions were all on the up and up, we should really have already have lunar bases and have full understanding of lunar origin or creation at this point, but it's still a big, big question. Damn, an 85-inch is going to be crazy, Ron. Vision says, imagine if the surface was all bubbling still. Like, I feel like that's why the moon might not be that old. I always feel like the whole idea, I don't know if any of y'all have listened to Peter Mungo Jupp at Thunderbolts, or was it CJ Ransom, talking about how this idea of transmogrification and petrification and fossilization could have occurred in much shorter periods if there was electric discharge between planetary bodies versus over hundreds of millions of years. So you wonder if the moon was formed in ways that didn't actually take that long, you know, maybe 10,000 years as opposed to millions. Yeah, I mean, what I was listening to Wal Thornhill talk about is the idea that, you know, he got off the fence about hollow planets and hollow Jupiter, and how, you know, from the inside, if you have a core that's hollow pushing out energetically and you have the ether pushing in, that, you know, planets and stars will form shells. Some will be made of plasma, some will be made of liquid hydrogen lattice structures, some will be made of carbon and hydrogen, and others will look like the moon, I guess, you know. And it's actually fascinating to think that if the moon is hollow, you know, what is inside the moon? Are there civilizations? Is it habitable inside the moon? Is it habitable inside Earth if Earth is hollow? I think those questions are really valid, you know, even though they do venture into conspiracy world. I think those are questions that are really, like, very interesting and should be explored further. And when you look at all those old interviews with, like, Admiral Byrd and Operation High Jump and stuff like that, the people who are in charge were actually very interested in all of it. But for some reason it routed into fantasy land versus actual exploration. Alright, so I'm just double checking which crater this is. I feel like it's not Archimedes. This is Aristoteles and Mitchell, right? And then bottom, then it's Eudoxus. Yeah, this is looking amazing, actually. Jesus. Aristoteles crater, 87 kilometers, and then Eudoxus underneath that at 68. You know, this is a great formation that kind of, I don't know if it looks really like a double lobe plasma kind of formation, but it actually is a very interesting formation in and of itself because of how it's really on the rim of this larger crater, and it seems like they both coexist without really affecting one another. So even if one, you know, let's say the larger one, Aristoteles, occurred first, you still have this other crater literally at its wall without breaking through or creating any type of debris. So let's keep moving. C. Smith is saying, we definitely know that it's metallic now. Yeah, I feel like the thing is, there's water ice, right? And there's different types of noble gases, and then you also have a high ferrous materials like titanium, magnetite, iron. You can see the different colorings in the mare. Of course, it's really not, it doesn't seem like a huge mystery. I feel like that stuff should be solved. But then the combination of all of it makes it seem so organic and alive versus like this dead planet, which is what's referenced in PopSci. It's like, oh, been there, done that moon. But to me, it feels very much alive. Like, to Vision's point, I don't think it's really bubbling necessarily. Maybe it's it's just on a low simmer, depending on where it is in its electrical pathway. So we're here north of Mare Imbrium, one of my favorite features, little Montes Tenerife, Pico, our little weird periodolic writing on Montes Recti. Yeah, Ron Crittenden says petrification is a result of getting rid of moisture under extreme heat and tremendous pressure over time. Yeah, so what I was referencing is the fact that there are discharge laboratory experiments with high voltage discharge into clay, into essentially mediums that have a ton of moisture. And electric discharge can create the effect of extracting moisture from these mediums in much faster timelines than we normally know about on Earth, which are in the tens of millions of years. On the scale of something like a mountain range, sure, in a laboratory, if it happens overnight, then you extrapolate outwards, but it doesn't take things like, you know, if you can do it in the laboratory in a day, you can imagine that it possibly took 1,000 to 5,000 years outside. I definitely, even though people think that might be crazy, I definitely question the age of our history and what we really know up until a certain point about 12,000 years ago, where all knowledge seems to have begun, and everything before that is just seems like very pure speculation from people who just want to sound correct or who have something to gain by solving that mystery. And so a lot of people tell me dinosaurs or carbon dating, but really most of that is extrapolated. Real history, like, seems like it kind of ends around 12,000 years ago. And that's very fascinating for also living in a world where we have scientists get on TV and Hollywood constantly telling people that the Earth is, 13.7 billion years old, very matter-of-factly, as if it's 100% proven and they're 100% certain about it, which doesn't really make sense to me. It never really did, but it was hard to articulate and sound confident about saying that they sounded like fakers. But it does sound like faking when you just say, yeah, Earth is this old, I know for sure. I did some maths. So I feel like it's very interesting to contemplate the age of the universe and to leave the room open to leave room for new theories or old theories or remix theories about like how the moon was formed or how old the moon is. Let's see. Getting back in the chat, Nathan Thompson says, any flags? No flags. I feel like if you could see flags, a lot of people would have footage of it at this point. So here at Valles Alpes, also a very cool feature, cut through the mountains. This is, it's called Valles Alpes in the Alpine mountain range. Let's get some tunes. Ooh, that's pretty toasty. Astronomy live stream says we need to find water in it, 3 states, solid, liquid, and gas. I don't know, that's a pretty arbitrary stipulation. I mean, maybe, but it's not even about that. It's more about the fact that, lunar geology is completely kind of still open for discussion, and it also at the same time feels like there is no real debate going on, nor is anything changing about it. But in order to possibly live there or have a lunar base, then maybe you're correct. You're likely correct. The authority wants sleepwalkers to think they are masters of all they survey, but in reality they don't have a clue. Authority wants sleepwalkers to think they are masters. Well, there is that, but there's definitely, advanced tech. So I definitely leave room open for, moon travel to be a very easy thing that is just not very public. It could also be something that's actually completely impossible, and that's also not public because it would create, a totally different type of extreme mentality. If all of mankind knew that you could never leave Earth, like that would be a pretty big deal. Or it would also defy, it would put so many people out of jobs and render so many people's thesi and degrees and positions really rendered useless with that revelation. And similarly, if getting to the moon were much easier, and yet it's been faked that it's very difficult. So those two options are completely aside from, what is the moon and why don't we study the moon and what happened with Apollo. Cassini crater, getting down towards the Apennine mountain range. Seems like, always feels like a dragon spinal column. I don't know, maybe we are part of the elite. Maybe we are. Timeless Dimensions, what's going on? They said they found some type of glass material that could only be created by a supernova. This material was on the surface and would have taken place within 12K to 23K years. So, it's very fascinating to talk about that sort of stuff because that whole idea of Libyan glass, right, that's referenced as like the firmament, you know, dropping chunks of glass. It's also referenced in Hollow Earth. But Libyan glass, like spherules on Mars, spherules in general, are all kind of referential of plasma events in the laboratory. When you see electric discharge, it can create spherules, it can create things that look like alchemy, create things that look like glass from other materials, it can do things like likely petrify things. You know, the idea of fossilization, I mean, think about it. You have fish mid-bite being literally frozen into rock, so carbon-based life turning into rock. And you have trees as well, like this idea of that, if that could happen with extremely high voltage over a very short period of time, then, you know, a lot of that means a lot of different things. The implications are huge. So to constantly think that, like, okay, things need 1 billion years or they could only have been created using relativistic thinking is just very, I think that's part of why, you know, we live in a stagnated astronomy world where, like, we can't really talk about new ideas because it's so rife with just all these big poetic marketing terms, like, you know, two interacting black holes and, you know, exotic dark matter, none of which really allow people to have a discussion about it that's rational. Nor do the astrophysicists and news reporters who use those terms actually sit down with the people they're evangelizing to and explain what they mean by two interacting black holes, you know, or the plot holes in the black holes, you know, or the fact that, you know, if you really study that stuff, you realize that you can't have two interacting black holes. By virtue of having a black hole, you can't have another. And things like that, just very, like, contradictory information within the same sentence even. And sentences, of course, make up all these articles, and you go through these articles, and every single line has about 3 or 4 untruths or unresearched paradigms that are just taken at face value. And so we can't move forward unless we learn to critically think. I'm just going to zoom out for a sec. Because astronomy livestream brings up a point that I can answer, or just like that I like to talk about. It says, getting to the moon was only a goal, not a conquest, which maybe I'm wrong, but that implies that somehow it's less important because it was done for military posturing or to defeat the Russians, right? It's always, there's this kind of weird story that was perpetuated that somehow, like, the energy and the magnitude and the miraculousness of achieving what Apollo claims it achieved is somehow subdued by the fact that it was done in the name of war or done in the name of posturing, political posturing, or whatever that was, and that somehow that makes it less important to go back, less important to talk about than it would be had we done it for a greater goal for humankind, which, if you all know, it was in a way done in the name of humankind, but of course we know that's not really true. But the fact of the matter is that that is pretty irrelevant, and it just takes somebody to articulate that notion is very irrelevant. And I don't mean to be rude, David, it's just like that idea that who cares that it was done in the name of war or not war. The fact is, an agency is claiming they did something that is nothing short of a miracle in this physical reality. And I think it warrants deeper discussion whether or not it was done to posture against the Russians, right? Like, it doesn't seem any less important just because it was done in wartime. And then the common excuse is the public lost interest, NASA got defunded, And it wasn't, the Cold War was over, so we proved our point, therefore we never replicated this miraculous achievement. It's like saying, you know, we won the last marathon, therefore no more marathons. And that has never happened with anything else, not with airplanes, not with cars, not with fuel, not with archaeology, not with reality TV. Everything gets replicated across the world because that's the way the world works. And somehow this one achievement, this one technical marvel, is played down as if, oh yeah, they just did it because that's when they had the money and that's when they could have done it and so many people worked on it. It was just this one instance where we could achieve things that could not be achieved, but somehow now we can't really replicate. And no country can replicate. And so now we have to wait 8 years to see if we get another man or woman on the moon. And to think that, like literally have to wait 60 years to replicate this feat is pretty astounding, and it does reek. That's the problem. And even, you know, no matter, and I'm the type of person that kind of wants it to be true. I want the moon missions to be real. I don't want retribution, but it seems so crazy that we can't do it. So crazy. Like I said, it could also very well be very easy, and it's just not public. So that would also make a lot of sense. Timeless Dimension says we were told not to come back. Yep, look, it was, I don't know. It's too far away. If the moon is actually the right size and the right distance, there would be no way to see actual human-sized aliens on the surface, nor buildings or anything like that. That's a great opportunity for me to say why I really don't watch any other like alien-style video channels, because this idea that you can actually see bases or ships from Earth with consumer-based telescopes is so outrageous and ridiculous that, yeah, it drives me a little batty. Let's see, Duplicate, what's going on? What's going on? Vision says we lost that technology, lol. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but why doesn't the reporter say, how could you lose that technology? Think about it, like, how do we have a press, well, that's a rhetorical question. I know that the press is completely corrupt, but the idea that, like, you know, regular viewers don't expect the press, like the reporter, to ask the follow-up question, which is, how did you lose the technology, or why, or like, what are the implications of this, or who's responsible? The fact that you have that one soundbite of the cat at NASA being like, well, I really would like us to go back to the moon, but we lost all that technology, sorry. Where's the follow-up? Where's like the third or fourth or fifth question? And then where's the guy who gets arrested for losing all that data, which is public, you know, taxpayer property? You know, but then at the same time you'll get what I find idiotic are the people who are so proud that Buzz punched Bart Sibrel. If you guys know what that's all about. Now maybe Bart Sibrel was acting up, and people could argue that, but to go back and to bring up the fact that you're proud that somebody got punched in the face is so petty and just so unwise that, like, you see like why we have to kind of learn how to talk to people in a more polite and understanding way, but also abate these ridiculous notions of retribution and putting people in their place. You know, I don't know, I'm down on my rabbit hole about emotions. It's hot, so my brain starts to melt. What's going on in the chat room, everybody? What do you think? I'm talking about some random stuff, but we got a super crispy moon. What's up? Cichlid Visuals? I remember you, yeah, what's going on? It says, even though we had more planned, it's still a mystery. C. Smith says, moon landing has way too many unknowns and not enough evidence. My mind may change, but it seems like BS. Cichlid says, but lack of tech is not the issue. We were either told not to come back by higher powers, or we're ignorant to the dangers and they will not tell us the truth. Like I said, I mean, it's very, like, it's a strong argument to say, hey, like, we can't tell all of humanity that you can't get into space. Like, humankind can never leave the magnetosphere, for example, because literally nothing exists outside of 10,000 miles around Earth, but we can send robots. That would be something that internally, like, why would you ever want to reveal that to your consumers? So there are a lot of different things besides, you know, Apollo is fake or not fake. There are a lot of different speculative routes that I just have to keep open about, because partly, like I said, I don't want retribution. I actually want the moon missions to succeed. Like, I just want to have a space program that's actually interesting, exciting, and inclusive. And it's just, it's sad that it is almost so full of conspiracy and anger and dissatisfaction with our agencies and our government, and the people who lead NASA. Like, why is it so primitive and yet so advanced at the same time, and yet, like, we have no access to it either? Yeah, it must be actually really nice and cool in Denver, right? ALS says they trashed the Saturn V blueprints. Okay, so let's say they trashed them, but, like, does no reporter or no, like, New York Times article say, well, this government agency had literally miraculous technology that they just happened to be able to develop because they wanted to, not because they were able to, like, have a technical achievement. They literally were forced to do it, and they achieved this thing that's a miracle. And somehow somebody destroyed those plans and those abilities to do that. Like, there's no follow-up. That's what I mean. Like, you say, I'm not trying to nitpick you particularly, but there is that kind of old school mentality of just saying things like, oh, it was in the Cold War, therefore don't ask any more questions about it. Like, what's that about? Or like Obama when he was like, been there, done that. Like, what kind of phrasing is that about the moon, which literally controls tides and has water and the history of all of life potentially, and is literally a deity, I mean, a visible god in our sky. And it's treated by the powers that be in the media as if, like, it's just, oh yeah, we just played a Super Bowl. I don't know, not a Super Bowl, but just like some sort of regular event. Oh yeah, it was military posturing. It was like, yeah, like we just military postured and went to the moon. I'm like, no, that doesn't really register. You know? Timeless Engine says, right, like, there's where we put that. Cichlid Visual says, too much money to lose from the marketing perspective, to be honest. That's probably what it is. Marketing really runs it. But it's the same thing I was saying on my stream the other night, which was like this idea that, like, we have to put up the Starlink or the Iridium satellites or all these, like, gridded, like, tiny CubeSats, no matter what, just because you need 1,000 satellite cell phones for special ops. Like, really? Do we really need those 1,000 like satellite phones? And the payment for it is like 80 freaking pieces of space junk that the media complains about and says that mankind is dumping space junk, but in fact it's these board of directors at Iridium Sat. You know, those are the cats putting space junk, and then those are also the cats paying MSNBC to complain about space junk. It's some bullshit. Excuse my language. Eat all your fish says Nazis run it. I mean, that's a whole other can of fish. Eat all your fish. If I even started there, but, like, yes, advanced German scientists ran NASA, and then people talk about, like, how proud they are that it's an American program. Yeah, there's massive hypocrisy. Look, nothing wrong with very smart people who, like, didn't want anything to do with the rise of the Third Reich, but, like, that's a whole other thing that I kind of don't like to address on this channel. I don't want to talk about that type of politic, but yeah, I mean, of course that was the program. see some more tune times. Let's see. Grand solar minimum. So yeah, the quick and dirty on how I feel about the sun is that Pierre-Marie Robitaille and a couple of others, Don Scott and a few others, were talking about an electric sun with a surface. That makes sense. Cold sun, a sun that heats by induction and solar radiation and not by fire and thermodynamic principles, even though there are laws of thermodynamics that look like they make sense, some don't. And you know, sky scholar Pierre-Marie Robitaille goes into this sort of stuff with Kirchhoff's law and thermodynamics, and really explains really what's wrong with the model of the solar sun, the gaseous sun versus a liquid metallic lattice sun that has a surface. And so once you take that, you kind of realize that you have solar minimums, solar maximums, you have cycles, that the sun and the moon essentially control the weather, and then, or at least have a massive influence on the weather, and then solar maximums and minimums control earthquakes, induce earthquakes, tsunamis, etc., and ionize and probably move the magnetic field around on Earth. So it's really directly correlated to space weather. I think, you know, I gotta give at least a big shout to Suspicious Observers, because he was really on top of that for a long time. Ben Davidson was talking about like solar activity and Earth weather, and he's been on it for a very long time, and it seems like that makes sense. You even call them air currents and wind currents. Electricity intrinsic. What else we got? Ron Crittenden says the face of wars was not discovered. Is that the face on Mars? I think the face on Mars, I don't know, that's a tough one. Really hard to gauge from Earth. We don't have the tech to see that formation. And I don't know, it could have been a statue, like a monolithic, like Sphinx type carving, mountain dome. It could also have been pareidolia. There's a ton of that. The human eye wants to look at symmetry and recursive geometry and make sense of it. And you know, you apply images and faces and dogs and cats to random geometry constantly around you. So it very likely could be pareidolia on Mars as well. I think the reason it was perpetuated is because the powers that be enjoy having the regular folk and people who follow media that they want them to believe in aliens, and they want them to have people like Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan and people like that propagate myths about alien invasion or ancient aliens or DMT, elf aliens, when in fact it's much more logical that we're within consciousness inside a conscious electric field, and we have telepathic abilities as a physical process, and we have outer body experiences since we are all interconnected information. And so all these phenomena that are usually attributed to these supernatural phenomena actually have physical manifestations and rationale that none of these people reference in their work, which is what I was saying the other night about Electric Universe. Even if you don't believe it, it is a litmus test for all the channels out there that talk about discovery or wake up or theory, you know, from flat earth to hollow earth to DMT people to ayahuasca to Joe Rogan to Jordan Peterson, or whatever that guy's name is, to Gary Vaynerchuk. These guys never mention the fact that electricity is intrinsic and possibly the interconnected web of consciousness. Then essentially you can scan people's bodies and get information without telepathically. You have anti-gravity, you have different types of energy. All these implications just fall like a young universe, answers for pyramids and dinosaurs. Go on, you name it. There's a litany of things that all these channels don't ever reference. They don't whisper electricity, because it would open up so many doors, I think. Biggest rabbit hole. No one knows who built the pyramids. There are no writings, only speculations. Yeah, but actually, there are people who are rationally observing pictures of the pyramids and using like actual ancient writings and realizing that you can actually cut and you can levitate stones using acoustics, you can cut stones using the sun. There are primitive tools that seem very advanced and almost like magic, and also would have worked way better on an Earth that was more highly charged possibly and had less gravity. You could lift bigger things, you could have larger people, you could have dinosaurs, you could have air currents that lifted pteranodons and brontosauri and allowed them to live. They could also have existed 20,000 years ago, possibly, you know. But the pyramids, you know, I've seen a lot of excellent explanations for how the pyramids were built with, you know, possibly stacking bags of concrete and having them, you know, become firm, you know, like squeezed together almost like marshmallows, and have different types of clay. And then I've seen sound acoustic levitation for stones and different valleys. In like Sumeria, they used to use these giant horns to levitate stones, sympathetic resonance. That's a whole other thing. Ron Crittenden says, not true, the Saturn V engines have been modified for the Orion project. I see them every day. I work for NASA. If you do, that's awesome, and I got no hate. I just want to know if we can go to the moon and soon in my lifetime, because it would be amazing. I'd love to like just stream this show and also at the same time have like a little picture-in-picture of our space program with astronauts of all countries working together, going back and forth to the moon, like. But just imagining idealism. We've got a skyhook. Now maybe I'm getting lost. Coral Castle, been there, amazing place. But think about it. So he essentially tuned the rocks, right, using a flywheel. And the flywheel was essentially two counter-rotating currents, so he created like a mini Birkeland current. I pushed one of the giant rocks, and it actually works essentially. So every object. I mean, I'm going really fast here, but the implications are that like every object has a magnetic field or several magnetic fields, I guess, or just fields in general, I guess. And you can kind of tune these into directional frequencies and actually change the weight and the mass, I guess, or the way it interacts with what we perceive as gravity, so the Earth's electric field or magnetic field. So that's massive implications there, but that just sits on the side of a road and people go there, they walk around and they just, oh wow, this little guy built all these things, wow, and they go off and just forget about it, and it's not actionable. But I have his little magnetism book, and it's really fascinating how he talks about, it's not just that he discovered the energy of the pyramids or the Egyptians, he just used logic and reverse polarity, and really stuff that like Steinmetz and Russell and Tesla were talking about. Yeah, the poured concrete formula really opened my eyes to the fact that like we don't really know how the pyramids were done, and that is a great theory on how it could have been done. It looks very possible. Certain stones look much larger than being able to just pour them, for example, especially like the Pumapunku stuff, and certain other ancient structures don't look like, I think you could really pour them. They look like they were laser cut. But I'm thinking, you know, that you could have easily had these Fresnel mirrors that created beams of like laser beams using sunlight, very possible, or ways to cut it with water, water jets. So it's interesting how mankind like the powers that be want us to feel like our ancestors were primitive and somehow like they couldn't have done these things, but I think they were very advanced in ways that we can't understand right now. All right, taking a little break, talking a lot, but thanks for listening to me ramble. I mean, do you, like, you hear me on the moon stuff, right? Like, I'm all about it, let's do it. but like, why is it so impossibly difficult, and how like was literally a miracle performed 50 years ago? I mean, straight up miracle getting to the lunar surface, this object we're looking at right now, and they just walked around at the, like, and somehow drove a golf cart and like did experiments and then came back alive and all lived to ripe old ages, and somehow, you know, we're living this technological marvel of a reality where I'm literally streaming this content to you. That alone is crazier than any of the tech they were using, and somehow like we can't get back to the moon publicly. It's really pretty disappointing. Duplicat says something interesting, says, I'm a bit of an expert on concrete. It only has a 300-year life cycle before complete deterioration due to weathering. That's in reference to the pouring of the ancient stones. I feel you on that one. Like, that does make sense. And I don't want to say it was a convenient theory, but it really does. Like, even if it's wrong, it's actually a great like way to open the mind into thinking about like how stones could have been packed together, because that is a great way to do it. Well, let me know if y'all want me to zoom into a particular region. Yeah, forced dinosaur labor. Exactly, dinosaurs built the pyramids. Alien dinosaurs. I was gonna say, looking at all the features, I feel like Theophilus that I got in zoomed right here is like the sharpest feature tonight. Everything else looks pretty good, but this looks amazing, especially because you have the interesting geometry on Katharina and what's the other one? Theophilus, Cyrilius. Exactly. So Theophilus, Cyrilius to the left bottom, kind of. This is an interesting one, right? Like Theophilus being such a deep walled crater, and then you have Cyrilius, which is almost identical in radius, or in diameter rather, but then you have like a trifecta central peak, like very different type of central peak, and much more raised floor, right? So like, was it carved into the higher regolith, like mountainous region, and then Theophilus was carved deeper into the regolith? Or, did Cyrilius happen after Theophilus, but it didn't really affect it? I mean, I guess you can see the wall is kind of broken, but it really feels like very subtle push, very subtle breakage versus, an impact which would have really shattered it and really messed with the circularness of it. And then further, you have this really cool, like, little square formation. Even Cyrilius looks very square tonight, like diamond shaped. But that's, Cyrilius F with a very interesting, like, square within square shape. Cichlid says, stunning sharpness, the A65 is a little monster. It certainly is, man. I've been looking at, like, thinking about new cams, and I'm like, no, this is still pretty badass, at least for another year. You gotta save up, and then maybe grab, like, an A7 III or something. But I don't even know if I want to move to that kind of full frame just yet, just because, like, one, it adds a lot of weight on the scope. And then two, especially with like a 2x or 3x Barlow, you have like a full frame camera with the battery like hanging off the side. Makes it a little difficult to use. And then second, it's like, it's bad enough with these files that I have terabytes and terabytes of data. So until like I can really afford like, I don't know, a 20 terabyte SSD, which is not even close to reality just yet. Once SSD becomes a real reality and you have like a 5 terabyte SSD, maybe you can really start doing 4K, 8K properly. But this is kind of the max out, I feel, of like this current tech. I mean, I'm sure David Astronomy live streams like, what is it, RASA or C11 or RASA, like with an A7R3 or A7S3 is pretty insane, I'm sure. But this is what I like for now. All right, so I'm at this interesting feature again, like, man, I'm using a lot of likes and ums, it's getting late. But this looks like a sinuous rill to me. Very long feature. This could have been like, in my mind, what I think it is, and I could be wrong, of course, but what I think it is like when you're having this plasma electric discharge interaction, you have one of these arcing discharges just move across the surface. So after all these little craterlets happen, let's say you have like one arcing discharge that moves slowly and creates this raised tunnel effect, what are called sinuous rills, or, are sometimes misconstrued, I think, as volcanic ash tubes. Because look at this thing, like, where's the volcano? Where's the source of this? And like, how hasn't it collapsed? Which is what typically happens with volcanic lava tubes. Let's see. Pointed middles, right. Eat all your fish says, to the left of Aristarchus, right on the edge, there's a crater with a base in it. All right, let's check out. Let's check it out. You don't have to twist my arm to go to Aristarchus. Yo, Ron, thanks so much. You have a great night. Hope I catch you on a future stream. All right, let's head over to Aristarchus. Aristarchus. All right. So Aristarchus crater. Herodotus is the little flat-floored crater to the left of Aristarchus, left bottom. It's actually like center of the screen right now. And as I mentioned earlier, you got Schroeder's Valley, Vallis Scroteri, the kind of another sinuous rill, another evidence of possible electric arcing discharge, like filament going across the surface, creating like a snake-like filament. The reason for that, you have recursive symmetrical geometry, you have waves, and you have like ripples. And the fractalness is not lost on me because everything sort of just looks like plants and nature on Earth. So when you're looking at geology, you're seeing these patterns repeat. That's just my opinion. Actually, Eat All Your Fish said, made a comment that actually reminded me of a little rant I can go on about how like the lack of images and how ridiculous a lot of the images are that you search on Google. So pretty much 90% of the world uses Google to find their images. And a lot of them don't use the tools like search for larger images or, basically filtering your search. But so you think about typing in these very interesting topics like how does the eye work, or like what is focal distance, how does rain work, where the origin of the moon, black hole science, and so many other things like Egyptian mythology or Tesla, for example. Like now Tesla really is synonymous with cars and Elon Musk. Even though a select group of people who do the research know about Tesla, the scientist, the majority of search results now come up with vehicles, and within 10 years it might literally eradicate the name of one of the most major important scientists to grace the last century. So it's stuff like that that happens that really is why I kind of preach critical thinking, because whatever data is thrown at you, you're able to really dodge and figure out like how to interpret it. So it's not just about knowing one thing, it's about having a way to interpret everything. So anyway, pictures of Neptune, for example, or pictures of, I remember that of course that started with like pictures of Earth from space, pictures of satellites, for example. There's so few, even though there are apparently some, and some do look realistic. The amount of pictures of celebrities or insects or food or any number of things versus the number of actual things in space or objects in space or craft in space or actual pictures of planets. It's astounding, the plethora of junk versus the dearth of, really, like there are 10 images of Neptune in the entire Google sphere. That's crazy. Like, granted, citizen scientists can't take pictures of Neptune, but you think at least one government scope or like one team would take like 30 pictures of Neptune or a video of Neptune from the last 10 years, but it just doesn't exist. That's crazy to me. Pictures, let's say video of a spacecraft leaving, like firing its final rocket booster to leave Earth orbit. Like that footage almost never exists either. So you have all this footage with rockets getting to about 200 to 500 kilometers, and then you have no footage from the front of the rocket. And there are all these reasons why, of course, but you just don't have that footage. Pictures of, let's say, the approach to Jupiter. Sure, there's one very low-res video of an approach to Jupiter. But the fact of the matter is, like, the resolution on the camera is so insanely low and always so suspiciously low that it invites questions that are so ridiculous, because like people just get irritated by it. People don't feel invigorated or positive by things like that. And yet the agencies keep doing things like that constantly by putting the lowest possible lowest pixel camera, and granted, there are a lot of different reasons why that could be the case. Of course, defunding, of course, there are a lot of reasons, but one of them that's my pet peeve is essentially we didn't go out there to take pictures. It's just like one of the worst and most annoying excuses that the powers that be and science apologists use, because when you really consider that as an open-minded, critical person, you realize how judgmental that kind of statement is, and how how rude it is to somebody asking a question. Of course, somebody asking you if you're a space program, like, why don't you put the best camera possible? To rudely tell them that they're an idiot for asking that question, and say, to imply that you worked on $1 billion mission and still put a low resolution camera on board. and then tell the person who's reasonably asking you why you did that they're the idiot is just a very interesting tactic in the propaganda land as to how to mess with people. But that's really what it is, because it is a valid question to ask, like, why if we have consumer cameras that can take these amazing photos, that those are not on the front of these billion-dollar satellites. And somehow the purpose is not to take photos when the purpose should be to take photos, in addition to doing, radiometric tests and all the other things that the spacecraft is supposed to do. It should additionally take phenomenal video. Like, that's the obvious follow-up to that, but that follow-up is never written about, it's never blogged about, it's never talked about on CNN. The experts never have that follow-up question or the follow-up story to, like, what the bullshit presentation was initially. Man, it is rant night for sure. Eat All Your Fish says, pretty clear from Google search of white inventors that the results are being manipulated. Controlling info, very dangerous. I don't know if I would say dangerous. I think, like, if you're a critical thinker, you can find things, or the lack of things. But that's what's interesting. Like what I was saying earlier is that these images don't exist, let's say, of Neptune. However, and it irritates me, but it doesn't make me think that, like, the people who take these pictures owe me pictures of Venus. You know what I mean? Or, sorry, of Neptune or Venus, for example. Like, these agencies are not my friend. You know what I mean? Like, they're not out there to serve my astronomical purpose. They're out to serve their own astronomical purpose, and they could argue that, like, I have no right, or we have no right to even judge them on that because they're just private industry. So I think the issue that I think citizens face is that they've been marketed to as such that these agencies work in the name of mankind. But in fact, these agencies just market that way. They don't actually work in the name of mankind. Not Blue Origin, not Virgin Space, not SpaceX, not NASA. They work for themselves. But their marketing tactics in order to get funding and to just operate in the public eye without scrutiny is they say they do it in the name of humanity. And so when you do it in the name of humanity, and that's your marketing strategy, and then you spend all your money on marketing to people, telling them that no, it's one small step for man, and mankind really benefits from everything we do, like sending satellites into space, going to the moon, Mars, Jupiter, etc. That's just marketing. So it's one of those things that if you want to take that seriously, that's where you can live. And then you could also live with the world that, like, these are companies that market to you in a really insidious way that makes you think that they're doing it in your name, but in fact they don't owe you anything. And so my solution is to, like, stream the moon or the planets, because that's what I can actually do to change the paradigm. But waiting for Keck Observatory to take another picture of the moon for me could be a lifetime. So that's, I think, like, where no one really talks about how to actually solve the problem. The problem is to just actually replace the shit that you don't want to see with stuff that you do want to see. And then just over time, more and more people will do that, and then that will eventually be the norm. But right now you have a whole ton of other people who just insist on a bunch of nonsense over and over and over, and that's where we live. And so it's just going to take a lot of time and repetition of this new here. So I know y'all talking about Google search results, but check out Neptune. I mean, that's really fascinating to me, because Neptune, Uranus, and yeah, Neptune really. Take a look at, like, Subaru, Keck, Mount Wilson, NASA, Neptune, and just think about, like, how many shots there are of this planet, like, and how many there really should be, considering how magical it really is, and how, like, citizen scientists can't take photos of Neptune, and how, like, the agencies are the only ones that can really take photos. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing. That planet is just crazy. Like, Neptune has all these, like, I don't know. it'd be an incredible experience to be able to actually scope Neptune. But let me know in the chat if y'all have seen that image of Neptune that I'm talking about, with like the crazy ring and the blue shot where it has the storms, and of course they have things where they have laser interferometers and ways to really keep Neptune in view, perfectly focused. And yeah, I would love to see Neptune. It's very exciting. Fantasy Ecstasy, you keep the party going on the West Coast. All right, I feel you. Light Moon says, things aren't what they seem to be. That's very poetic. It really, like, it is true, but it also, like, things are also what they seem to be. And also what they aren't. They aren't seen to be. Things aren't seen what they to be. Anyway, that's the homework. Check out Neptune. And we got like great shot of Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon. I feel bad even cutting the stream, but I'm getting wiped. I'm gonna have a nice long dream about space. Thanks for listening to me rant all about all this random weird shit. Like I said, no retribution. I want a real space program, like real open, free, at least semi-free space program with citizens involved and amateur astronomers involved, and a real fund and a real working together, so we can experience space, you know. Yeah, Tom is like, I haven't seen the fake pic of Neptune yet. Copper's like, post the link. Google is pure evil. Oh well, like, honestly, evil is just a perspective on things as well. Things are good, things are evil. It's pretty arbitrary. I think evil has to exist to have good, good has to exist to have evil. Like, you could see things both ways. You could still, like, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but Eat All Your Fish says, manipulating info might be one of the most evil things you can do if you have the power to do so. So, just quickly about evil and the idea of a catalyst, right? Like, you really need these things. It's an ancient philosophical discussion about how, the black needs the white, white needs the black. You need these kind of cycles in order to, you need contrast, essentially, to see anything. You need the page for the words. And not that you need people like who are in charge right now, but typically systems do have a kind of pyramidal power structure. Whether or not you agree with the power structure, like, it still functions that way. I mean, in no way to be rude to flat earthers, but like the same thing with spheres, like spheres and shells. The concept of that actually makes also like a lot of natural sense to me. So anyway, I'm gonna close it out on that. We're all connected somehow, and we might just be the devil and the God at the same time, keeping ourselves asleep in this long dream of our own creation. Maybe it's just a testing ground for experiencing wild, crazy things, and that's how we get to learn about the next phase of life when we die. You know, the final thing I'll say about that is, really this is remixing Alan Watts, but he talks about how somehow we feel like death happens to us, like we're not part of it. It's the same way we feel about our bodies, like we're doing all these things, like I'm talking to y'all and I'm streaming, but my body is still like breathing and digesting and growing and doing all these things. So it's the same way we look at the world, like things are happening to us, the government's doing these things to us, and it's not really only that. It's that, but it's also you doing and collectively collaborating to make it something. So the waiting and seeing and waiting and watching is just like definitely possible, but it's much more fun if you collaboratively like change things. So, which is why I say, like, if you don't like what NASA's doing, go out and buy a telescope, stream your own stuff, and say, hey guys, like, NASA can do their own thing because they're a company that wants to like sell shit and get funding, but I want to show you like the moon and Saturn and shit like that. It's kind of that silly in a way, but imagine you had 100,000 people who did that, and then you'd have government agencies like basically become irrelevant. Because enough people would really be in touch with space on their own, and they'd have an understanding about the moon, and they'd discuss things. Eventually, it's like anything that you practice, even stuff that like people think, oh, I'm not innately talented and I can't figure it out. Like if you spend 10 years doing the same thing, you're just going to eventually get pretty good at it and discover new things about it and get practice. Same thing with the moon. If like 50 people at a time really had debates about the moon and space, things would advance. Light Moon says, meat-coated skeleton. That is both disgusting and enlightening. Ooh, meat-coated is gross. I gave up meat a few years ago, but I will not forget that. Alpha and beta. So beta. Okay, I don't know. I'm going to let this moon drift off. Let's say goodbye to these wonderful features, crispy features. Have a nice, amazing weekend, everybody. Oh, here's a mushroom. Here, I'll end it on a mushroom question. Eat all your fish says, if you eat enough mushrooms, you can see the matrix web net surrounding the planet/dome and the firmament behind it. True freaking story on several occasions. So whether or not that is all true, like I said, I think all interconnected electrical dielectric field at speed of consciousness, so you literally have telepathy and you have action at a distance, so instant thought, instant understanding concepts, and then we're just not practiced at using it. So any trip on mushrooms or DMT is just activating a certain part of your mind that allows you to see into this interconnected net of electrical filaments. So physical manifestation, physical probability and possibility for metaphysical interactions. All right. Ride on into the night, everybody. Be kind, be wise,